Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Time Magazine named its Person of the Year today. Do you care? Me either. But the mainstream media sure do, acting like it's, well, 1999. But first, usually I am not a fan of I told you so's. But remember the Texas abortion law passed in September. Supreme Court recently seemed to basically uphold the law with certain conditions and restrictions about who can sue, etc. The law doesn't outright ban abortion, but instead empowers individuals to sue and make money if they can identify anyone who's aided or assisted in an abortion after 6 weeks. Even though, at least as of today, the Supreme Court has also ruled that the right to get an abortion is protected up until about 24 weeks. So this law circumvents the rulings of the High Court on this and just gives citizens the power to be vigilantes. And I said at the time, if this is upheld, this could lead to liberal states using the same toolbox. And now, not surprisingly, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is doing exactly that. On Saturday, he announced that he will seek to go after those who manufacture and sell assault weapons. At the time the law was passed, the Texas law, the Wall Street Journal editorial board published an op-ed warning, the law sets an awful precedent that conservatives should hate. Could California allow private citizens to sue individuals for hate speech? Or New York deputized private lawsuits against gun owners? Well, they were basically right. California's long banned assault weapons, but a federal judge overturned that in June, ruling it was unconstitutional, and likened an AR-15 rifle to a Swiss Army knife. After Friday's ruling in Texas, Gavin Newsom in a statement said, in part, if states can now shield their laws from review by the federal courts that compare assault weapons to Swiss Army knives, then California will use that authority to protect people's lives, where Texas used it to put women in harm's way. On Saturday, Newsom said he directed his staff to collaborate with the legislature and attorney general to draft a bill that would allow private citizens to file lawsuits for at least $10,000 against anyone who manufactures, distributes, or sells an assault weapon, ghost gun kits in the state of California. Now, legally, this California effort is as bad as the Texas law. It is a clear effort to circumvent a protected right, but it is the obvious outcome. We expect to speak with Governor Newsom about this later in the week. Joining us now is California Republican State Senator Brian Daly, who opposes the governor's efforts, but also believes it is different from the Texas law. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. So do you expect that the governor is going to move forward with this pledge and that it's going to become law?
Oh, good evening, Dan. Absolutely. I believe he will. He's a very progressive governor. He also has a very progressive legislature. But it's like comparing apples to oranges. We have the Constitution doesn't allow you to have an abortion. The Constitution allows you to bear arms, or the Second Amendment allows you to. So I think he's comparing it to, he's doing it to grandstand. He's obviously going to run for president of the United States. And, I wish he would just, quite frankly, do his job here in California. We had the Hoover Institute.
Let me ask you about that, because I agree with you that this law is something that he shouldn't do. But you say that it's like comparing apples and oranges, except that the individual right to own a gun wasn't recognized by the Supreme Court until 2008 in the Heller decision. In fact, before that, every federal court had said the right to own a weapon is only in connection with a well-regulated militia. Now, whether you agree with that or you don't agree with that, my point is that it was a Supreme Court interpretation in 2008 that changed the game. The Supreme Court has interpreted in Roe and Casey that an abortion is a protected right until 24 weeks. You can disagree with it, or you can disagree with the Heller decision. But in both cases, you have Supreme Court decisions, and in both California and Texas, you have efforts to circumvent those Supreme Court decisions.
Well, I believe that Governor Newsom will definitely run the bill. I'm not an attorney, but I'm sure that there will be lawsuits over this, and we'll see where we land. But in my opinion, we have the Second Amendment, which was an amendment to the Constitution. And, the 2008 case and the other cases you're citing are ones that I'm not going to be able to interpret. But,
Right.
I think the governor...
I guess my concern is that what I'm trying to do is take opinion out of this, right? Like, do you agree with the abortion ruling? Do you agree with the Heller decision, et cetera? It seems to me that whether we agree or disagree, the Supreme Court's rulings are the Supreme Court's rulings. And as far as I'm concerned, I accept them. I accept when the Supreme Court makes a decision. And by the way, the Supreme Court may overturn Roe versus Wade. If that is the case, I will accept that ruling from the Supreme Court. You can disagree, you can agree, et cetera. My concern, though, and this is where I was sort of struck by you saying that you view this as apples and oranges. To me, it's apples and apples. Because in both cases, you're saying, in one case, you're saying, well, I like the Supreme Court decision in this one. In this one, I don't like the Supreme Court decision. So it's okay in one case and it's not okay in another case. My position, and I share this with the Wall Street Journal's position, which is you can't decide which Supreme Court decisions you like or not in deciding which ones to circumvent. You got to simply say, this whole circumventing business in California and in Texas is bad news. It's bad policy. And it seems to me you got to be intellectually consistent, no?
Well, you bring up a fair point, and obviously we'll see what happens in the courts in the future, and that's really where it's going to land. I believe it'll be in the courts. Unfortunately, I think Governor Newsom's using this for an opportunity to, grandstand and be more progressive. I wish he would just focus more on what's happening here in California with, 260 businesses since 2018 leaving and going to other states. Stay home and do your job is what I would say to the governor.
Yeah, look, he is grandstanding. I mean, there's no doubt that this is a grandstanding move by the governor. Completely agree with you about that. And, I think he's trying to sort of make a point, and hey, he gets both ends of this, right? He can make a point and he can further bolster his reputation among progressives at the same time. But I guess I just think that legislators in both Texas and California need to recognize what we're dealing with here. And that's my concern, is that there's no consistency in the positioning, right? It depends on whether you like the Supreme Court or you don't like the Supreme Court as to how hard you fight against it. And someone like me says, I'll accept the Supreme Court rulings, whether I agree with them or don't, period. And let's not create these crummy laws that are an effort to get vigilantes going and trying to fight gun manufacturers, or going and trying to fight people trying to get an abortion after 6 weeks. And I would think that someone like yourself would say, yeah, makes a lot of sense. We should be consistent across the board. You get the final word.
Well, I'll just tell you this. I will be voting against the legislation. And obviously the courts are going to come out wherever the courts come out. And we'll weigh in on those battles as we move forward.
Fair enough. California State Senator Brian Daly. Sorry, I almost missed. We talked about this before we went on the air in the pronouncing of it. Daly. Professor Brian Daly, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I should say that we were expecting to have on Gavin Newsom today, and we expect to have him on later in the week. Time Magazine has come out with its annual Person of the Year. Do you care that it was Elon Musk? The mainstream media loves it, even though being on the cover and even the magazine itself just don't matter anymore. Coming up. Big news in the world of old media this morning. Time Magazine named Elon Musk its Person of the Year for 2021. Notice where I said that this is actually big news in the world of old media. Because do you care? I certainly don't. But if I was trying to make this a big deal, I'd tell you that the title puts the Tesla and SpaceX CEO, an esteemed company of 14 presidents, 3 popes, civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., among many others. And this is how the magazine describes the futurist CEO, which was, not surprisingly, read on MSNBC.
There's a man who aspires to save our planet and get us to a new one to inhabit. Clown, genius, edgelord, visionary, industrialist, showman, cad, a madcap hybrid of Thomas Edison, P.T. Barnum, Andrew Carnegie, and Watchman's Dr. Manhattan, the brooding, blue-skinned man god who invents electric cars and moves to Mars.
The Person of the Year, much like People's Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive, is the kind of feature that the media seems to live for. a tiny group of media editors get together and decide who they like, and the rest of the media picks up on it and treats it like it's important news or gospel. Now, let me be clear. I love a list as much as the next guy. But can't we stop pretending like the choice is actually symbolic of something? Now, maybe there was a time when this mattered a little, back when Time magazine mattered, back when Time and Newsweek were the most important weekly magazines, and I was, well, a young man. Yes, a long time ago. When being on the cover of Time meant something, people saw it, it had impact. But I'll admit, today I was surprised on how many media entities still picked up on the random decision of some people who happen to work at a dying magazine brand for what is now just a yearly clickbait opportunity called Time's Person of the Year announcement. This coming from an entity where a lot of their decisions, even over the past years, have just been dumb or not even people. Middle Americans were Person of the Year in '69. The Computer took home the title in '82. You or individual content creators were named Person of the Year in 2006. Look, Musk has made all kinds of headlines this year. This fall, he became the richest person in history. SpaceX was selected to build the next lunar lander and later launched the first all-civilian space mission. But in 2021, also, the National Labor Relations Board found that Tesla violated labor laws, threatening workers for attempting to unionize and firing an employee leading the cause. The electronic car maker also lost a racial discrimination suit, now faces 2 separate sexual harassment lawsuits. Look, I am not trying to beat up on Musk here. In terms of influence, he is a perfectly sound choice. But the editors take this decision so seriously, as if we should all take stock based on their important choice, and the rest of the media is buying it. While doing their rounds today, the magazine's editor-in-chief and executive editor both stressed that Musk's selection was merely the start of a wider conversation.
This Person of the Year, it's not an award. It is simply a measure of influence. And Elon Musk has influence on our lives for better or worse.
Like it or not, so much of our lives, even in this moment of incredible inequality, are being shaped by these very wealthy tech leaders.
This is a choice that's kind of meant to spur some conversation, and hopefully it spurs conversation about the kind of growing gap between the rich and the poor.
Wait, so now it's a politically motivated selection? Look, I don't care who they choose, but it seems to me the lemmings in the media all treating this like some big event makes me, well, it makes me want to bring in my guest, one of the most prominent and respected media critics in the country, Eric Deggans, TV critic for NPR. Eric, good to have you on the program. Appreciate it. All right, am I being unfair here to the Time magazine folks?
Man, first I got to say, I'm glad you said nice things before you brought me on. I hate to work at Time magazine, given what you just said. Well, I will say I'm of 2 minds about this. I agree with a lot of what you said, and in particular, this New York media's infatuation with Silicon Valley CEOs and wealth. And, I feel like a lot of Elon Musk's impact has yet to be determined. The things that people are touting him for being influential about, we still don't know yet. We don't know about driverless cars. We don't know whether his brand of electric-powered vehicles will become widespread enough to really affect Americans' lives. We don't know if he's going to put together a mission to Mars that will be successful.
But you're analyzing this. But you're analyzing this as if, like, this is a big decision. It's an important decision. It's a larger-than-life decision. And I guess, and you're now giving me the specifics of why maybe it was premature. And my point is, why do we care at all? I mean, and I understand. Look, I get why Time magazine does it, right? Bravo to them. Bravo to them on getting all the clicks, et cetera. But why does the rest of the media continue to buy into this? Magazine covers don't matter anymore. No one sees them. Time magazine's a dying brand.
First of all, you got to understand the value of having something that sums up the year in one easily digestible idea. That's what the person of the year does. And so it's Time's way of saying, here, we're going to tell you what's important that happened this year, but we're going to sum it up in a look at this one person, this one thing, this thing that we're calling a person. You know, you talked about Middle America and other things. So that's what's really happening here, right? You're getting a year-end analysis that is really sort of disguised as an honor placed on the person.
Right.
But beyond that, I want to
Sorry.
make a quick argument. I want to make a quick argument for it to say that this is something that they started doing in 1927. And as much as you want to make fun of, for example, them choosing Middle America, you know, Richard Nixon was elected president the year before of that in 1968 by appealing to Middle America and talking about the silent majority that was upset by the civil rights legislation and advances that had been advanced by a Democratic administration. And so Middle America was a potent political force at that time.
But I'm not
mocking
Middle America.
We say that's a good idea.
But I'm not mocking Middle America. I'm mocking not even picking a person at the time. But you know what? I don't even care about back then, right? Let's even assume that it had relevance back then, because it did. Time magazine mattered. My point is, considering how irrelevant Time is today, why does the media still pick up on this as if it's 1999 or 1968 or 1983? I would think that you would be able to join me in agreeing and saying, now that I think about how comparatively irrelevant Time is and their picks, and that we can agree that there's sort of a who cares element to this, and there's way too much media coverage of this. You disagree?
Again, you are missing my point where I said this is a convenient way to sum up what happened in the year in one person. I mean, you know, if it wasn't a person of the year, there would be some other analysis that would, you know, tell you what happened in the year, what the most important thing was, what the most notable person of that year would be. I mean, it makes sense to me that a magazine would do that. Does it mean that it's earth-shattering news when they do it? Not necessarily, but you can use that pick as an excuse to have discussions, just like the guy from Time said. And, you know, it does provide fodder to talk about these things. Now, what disappoints me is that I feel like sometimes when Time makes these choices, they don't actually have that discussion. They leave that to other people. The stuff that Joe Scarborough was reading, the text that they were reading about Elon Musk, I just, oh, really? Can we get a more substantive analysis? I think it's possible. And I think the idea has some merit, but I agree with you that sort of treating this as, you know, earth-shattering news. No, it's not that, but I don't think it's totally useless either. I don't.
All right. Well, Eric, I'm hoping in the years to come that you will start to agree and say, as years go by and Time becomes more irrelevant, that maybe Abrams was right. But you know what? In the meantime, this man, as I said, is one of the best and most influential. That's why we appreciate his time, and I appreciate you coming on the show, Eric. Great to have you.
Thank you. You're talking to a brother who has to generate a lot of year-end pieces, man, so I sympathize with the folks.
Fair enough. All right. Coming up, speaking of media, Chris Wallace leaving Fox News and heading off to become colleagues with CNN's Jake Tapper, who has actually trashed Wallace, and vice versa. That should be fun. Up next. Time now for our Mediaite Moments, where we check in on the day's bias, buzz, and the bull in the world of cable news and beyond. Big story in the cable news world broke this weekend when Chris Wallace shocked his Fox News Sunday viewers with news that he's leaving.
After 18 years, this is my final Fox News Sunday. It is the last time, and I say this with real sadness, we will meet like this.
Shortly after he announced the news, it was reported that he was going to CNN's yet-to-be-launched streaming service. It was the latest front in the cable news wars, or I guess we can call them now the streaming news wars, that led to predictable back and forth between the two networks' media reporters. First from CNN.
Chris Wallace is one of the, the journalists that is at Fox who stands out like a sore thumb because the network has become more and more radicalized, both in the Trump years and now in the Biden years.
And then from Fox.
In the era of hyperpolarization, Chris Wallace has been equally tough on Democrats and Republicans, no matter what some partisans may say.
Now, SiriusXM's Howard Stern made the comment, I think, that most of us are wondering.
And I got to tell you, I said, who the people don't want CNN? Who the hell's going to pay for CNN Plus? I mean, are they out of their minds? CNN Plus. Regular CNN isn't enough.
But the most awkward part might be yet to come. Wallace could get a chilly reception at the CNN cafeteria from CNN's Jake Tapper, as the two have been going after each other for years. There was Wallace calling out a Jake Tapper interview with former Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, saying, as much as I hate the expression fake news, this is a perfect example of it. And Tapper took a shot at Chris Wallace moderating the first presidential debate last year, saying this.
The moderator who did not have control of the debate stage for much of the evening, who didn't remind the president that he was violating the rules till 1 hour and 13 minutes into the debate.
And just days after that dig, Tapper abruptly shut down an interview with a Trump spokesperson with this.
That all black people think the same. Said if you're not voting for him and you're black, then you ain't black.
I'm not Chris Wallace.
And of course, Chris Wallace couldn't resist hitting back during a radio interview.
He's right. He isn't Chris Wallace. I think it's easy to criticize from the cheap seats.
Ouch. So as the news was breaking, Mediaite's Joe DiPaolo highlighted the historic acrimony between the two. And lo and behold, an hour after that story was published, Jake Tapper decided to congratulate Wallace. Quote, best wishes for whatever is next. Whatever's next. Would those best wishes being offered if he'd gone to MSNBC or come here to News Nation? Who knows? That's our wrap of the day's media bias and the bull. Coming up, gerrymandering. It is basically election cheating. Democrats and Republicans are doing it to ensure many of your votes don't count as much as they should. It's just benefiting the party extremes. And that's why we should all care about it. Coming up next. One of the things I hate most in all of government is gerrymandering. It's basically one party or the other cheating and depriving citizens of the power of their vote. It is truly a scourge on American politics. If you're not familiar, it's basically the practice of redrawing of district lines in favor of a particular party. So, for instance, let's say that a particular state has 10 congressional seats and it's 60% Republican and 40% Democrat. A fair drawing of the map would give Republicans roughly 6 of the seats and Democrats roughly 4. But a gerrymandered district could draw the lines in a way to give one party a disproportionate share. For example, one party could create a map where aggressive gerrymandering leads the Republican to get all pushed together more and give Democrats 7 seats and Republicans just 3, even though it's 60-40 in the other way. And it's hurting our country far more than most people realize. Gerrymandering pushes both parties further to the extremes of their respective sides. And it leaves anyone near the middle with fewer and fewer voices in Congress. Maryland has 8 congressional seats, and last week, the state's Democratic General Assembly passed a new state map, giving their party control of 7 of the 8. And the move drew an outcry from critics on the left, who actually think the gerrymandering map didn't go far enough. This article from Slate on Friday, Democrats could have gerrymandered away a GOP seat. Why didn't they? That's right, they're saying the Democrats should have been more partisan. Two prominent Democrats from Maryland believe that the Assembly should have redrawn the districts to give Democrats all 8 seats in a state that is 62% Democratic. Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader and a 20-term congressman representing Maryland, announced his support for a gerrymandered map in the state. And fellow Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin said, quote, given that Republicans were the ones who blocked redistricting reform and they're now in the process of trying to gerrymander us into oblivion from Texas to Georgia to North Carolina to Michigan to Wisconsin, we have not only a political right, but I would argue an ethical duty to do whatever we can to fight fire with fire and try to defend democratic values and democratic processes in America. It is true that Republicans have been using this cheat more often and have been more opposed to gerrymandering reform. 2017 AP analysis found 4 times as many states with Republican-skewed state houses or assembly districts than Democratic ones. But I care less about who does it more and more about calling it out and trying to shame the people who are engaged in this practice. The nonpartisan group Represent Us, which fights against corruption in politics, put out a report earlier this year which found that 35 states have an extreme or high threat of having their election districts, quote, rigged, to use their word, for the next decade. Now, I don't think it's an overstatement. Gerrymandering is a form of election rigging. It's a way to make your vote not count as much. The decision that paved the way for this was a 2019 ruling from the Supreme Court, which found that federal courts could not hear challenges to partisan gerrymandering. That decision essentially gave license to state legislators to basically do as they please. Following the release of the 2020 census with new congressional allotments apportioned, a number of states have moved quickly to redraw their lines, not based on the representation of the citizens of their state, but based on the whims of whoever has control of the state legislature. And last week, the Department of Justice sued Texas over their proposed redistricting, alleging that their map, according to Assistant Attorney General Vanita Gupta, quote, denies Black and Latino voters an equal opportunity to participate in the voting process and to elect representatives of their choice. Now, that is a slightly different issue, because that lawsuit is still permitted by the Supreme Court in that the DOJ is not challenging the Republican-heavy Texas map on partisan grounds. It's alleging a violation of federal discrimination law. But still, there is the risk that a lawsuit like that can come across as partisan if the DOJ doesn't also express concern about Democratic-controlled states. Again, Democrats and Republicans are looking for an edge. They're looking to game the system. You, the voters, are the ones who get cheated. Joining us now is Michael Lee, Senior Counsel for the Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program. He wrote a thorough report about gerrymandering earlier this year, which reached some troubling conclusions. Michael, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Put it into plain terms for us. People hear the word gerrymandering and it's, your eyes glaze over. Why does this matter, or should it matter, to an ordinary voter?
Well, what we're doing right now in redrawing the maps will determine who wins power for the next 10 years. We'll use these maps until the next census in 2030. And by putting the thumb on the scale, map drawers, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, will be able to essentially make elections meaningless because they will have predetermined who will win those elections. And that's really anathema to the founding principles of the country. I mean, the idea when we set up the country, John Adams talked about how legislatures, Congress should be an exact portrait or miniature of the people as a whole. And the idea is that every 2 years we have elections because as the mood of the people changes, so should the composition of Congress and legislatures. But that just doesn't happen because people artfully draw districts to predetermined results.
Well, let me ask you, I was thinking about doing this when we decided to do this segment. The one concern I had was, okay, I'm going to rant about gerrymandering. The Supreme Court has already ruled on it. It feels like it's kind of nothing that anyone can do. I mean, is there anything anyone can do apart from yell and scream and jump up and down about it?
Well, there actually is. And it's interesting that you began the segment by talking about how Democrats are saying they have, really a moral, quote unquote, moral obligation to gerrymander because the Supreme Court has allowed it and Republicans are doing it. But really, Congress has the power, and Chief Justice John Roberts, in the Rucho opinion that you mentioned, says that Congress can do it. Like the Chief Justice says the courts aren't getting involved. It's a political question. It's not our issue. But the Chief Justice John Roberts said that Congress can fix the issue. And there is a bill currently pending before Congress, the Freedom to Vote Act, that would ban partisan gerrymandering by statute. It would make it much faster to litigate cases. It would invalidate the Maryland map, but it also would invalidate the Texas map and the Wisconsin map and other maps that are around the country that are aggressively gerrymandered. And so really what Democrats need to be doing is they need to be putting pressure on Joe Manchin and Chris Sinema and really on the Biden administration to figure out a pathway to pass this bill, which would take care of something and help restore our democracy instead of defending their gerrymanders.
But isn't the way to pass something like that to make it more defined? Meaning the problem with a lot of these voting legislation issues is that they stick in all these other issues, right? And then as a result, people say, well, you know, I can't vote for it because of this or that. I mean, do you think that there's a possibility that just a gerrymandering statute alone, with nothing else, could pass Congress?
I don't know if that could pass Congress or not. It should pass Congress because it really is a critical issue. We're really running out of time if we're going to do something about gerrymandering for the 2022 midterms. You know, the candidate filing period in Texas has already ended. It will start very soon in other states, and pretty soon we're going to start having primaries, and it will be too late to change maps for the 2022 elections. And so if you're going to pass legislation and make changes, you've got to do so now, and they need to figure out whether that's a standalone bill or not. They need to figure out a pathway forward and around the filibuster.
Yeah, and because it does seem to me that it becomes more appealing to be able to ask for just this. And I get that there are other issues that are important, et cetera, but it does put pressure on people who oppose it because it's so clearly cheating in gerrymandering to just say, we're just going to oppose gerrymandering. That's it. That's the whole thing in this statute. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to pass. I think it's super important. And I think you're absolutely right on this. Michael Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, for having me.
Coming up, new details in the trial of the ex-Minnesota police officer who says she mistook her gun for her taser when she shot and killed Daunte Wright. Today, it was all about that fatal error. It's coming up next. The trial of a Minnesota police officer charged in the shooting death of Daunte Wright opens its second week of testimony today. Kim Potter shot and killed 20-year-old Wright in April after seemingly mistaking her handgun for her taser. Wright was pulled over for an expired tag, but then when officers realized he had an outstanding warrant for a weapons violation, they tried to arrest him. He resisted and appeared to try to drive away. As a reminder, here's the moment of the shooting that is proving critical in the trial.
Oh, wow.
26-year-old vet of the Brooklyn Center police force is charged with first-degree and second-degree manslaughter. She pleaded not guilty. She's expected to testify. Prosecution today was looking to erode the defense's argument that Potter's use of force was justified at the moment of the shooting. Now, a use of force expert today was unable to confirm that both officers alongside Potter were inside of the car and at risk when the shooting happened.
Peterson, was it possible to see Sergeant Johnson's head throughout the incident from Officer Potter's body-worn camera?
There were times where you could see his head, yes.
Okay. And during those times, what direction was his head pointed?
Towards the interior of the vehicle.
Okay. Was it possible to see his face?
At times, yes.
Okay. At the time of the shot, was it possible to see his face?
I recall seeing the top of his head.
Could you describe what you observed with regard to the location of Officer Lucky's feet, shoulders, elbows?
At what point?
Throughout the 10, 12, 14-second period of the struggle with Mr. Wright.
He's standing outside the vehicle on the driver's side.
All right, I should take a step back here. The reason that is important, the testimony you just heard, because the question is whether the force was justified based on the fact that other officers could be in danger. Meaning that one officer had his hand inside the vehicle. There's a question of, if Daunte Wright had tried to drive away, would he have gotten dragged with the vehicle, et cetera? So that's why this is a critical question of what the use of force expert can see and didn't see at the time. This after emotional testimony on Friday from Sergeant Michael Johnson, who was with Potter during the shooting. He talked about what could have happened if force had not been used.
Did Daunte Wright at any time show any sign of stopping, giving up, saying, okay, I'm done?
No.
And if he had taken off with you in that car halfway, what would have happened to you? What would you think would be the worst that would happen?
Probably dragged.
Dragged and what?
Injured.
Seriously injured, maybe even dead, right?
Yes.
We also saw this video of Johnson and Dante Wright struggling for the gear shift, as well as new video after the shot was fired. Officer Johnson trying to calm Officer Potter down and even taking her gun.
Oh my God!
Kim, that guy was trying to take off with me in the car. No, no, that's not happening, Kim. I'm giving you my gun, okay? I'm just going to hold on to yours. All right? Kim?
Say it again. I think legally it's a close case. I want to reserve judgment until I hear her testify. Joining me now, anchor and host for the Law and Crime Network, attorney Jesse Weber. Jesse, good to have you back. All right, so what was the most important thing to you in today's testimony?
It was really trying to establish the difference between the taser and the gun. They had an expert to talk about that, which is really the whole case. So aside from the fact that the taser's on one side of the belt and the gun is on the other side, they really tried to hit at the prosecution. There's a difference in color, there's a difference in texture, there's a difference in grip, and that the officer, the defendant, should have known the difference. Now, what I found fascinating is what happened under cross-examination, because her defense team said, well, she had one of the newer models, the newer taser, and that looks even more like a gun. Sure, there are the differences, but the grip looks so much like a gun. Now, I have to tell you what I found also fascinating is that we learned that Kim Potter didn't test her taser, which was part of the officer policy. She should have tested it that day. She didn't test it for 2 days, which just goes into A, she broke protocol, and 2, maybe if she would have tested it, she would have known that she didn't have a taser in her hand, that she had a gun in her hand. So I think it was a strong moment for the prosecution on that point.
And yet the defense seems to be pursuing a sort of dual defense, as you described it here.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. They're saying on one hand, this was a complete mistake. She didn't mean to gun him down. She thought she had a taser.
Right.
But on the other hand, she was justified in taking out her weapon and actually firing if that was her intention.
When you say weapon, you mean her gun.
Her gun, excuse me.
Right.
That she was justified in taking out her gun, because when someone is in a car like that, you're actually not supposed to take out your taser and use it in a moving vehicle. You're supposed to take out your gun, particularly if you think your colleagues are in danger. So it's a dual defense. It was a mistake, but also she was justified. I'm concerned for the defense that might confuse jurors later on.
I think that obviously what they're doing, right, is they want to say, look, it was a mistake. Clearly, everyone thinks it was a mistake. But if you're back there and there's some debate, remember the force was still justified, right? I mean, yeah.
It's reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
The two things the defense is trying to say is it was not reckless and it was not negligent. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the 2 counts of manslaughter.
Jesse Weber, thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Look forward to having you back. Coming up. A traffic stop leads to an officer literally being dragged as he's trying to get the driver out of the car. Didn't realize how this was going to be connected in some way to the story we've been covering. The whole thing is caught on police body cam. More of the incredible video coming up next. Tonight we are on scene with body cam video from the Reno, Nevada Police Department as they try to question a man seen walking around near a home multiple times. In the video, released by the police department in the past few days, the suspect seen on surveillance prowling around and asking about a girl. The man who lives at the home explained the situation to a neighbor.
Girl over here, and he started asking me about if I was into fitness and...
The suspect returned that night. He left before police arrived, but the residents started tailing the suspect, giving updates to dispatch until officers arrived. Police pulled the suspect over. When they tried to talk to the suspect, he rolled the window down about an inch, refused to give his name. Officers demanded he roll down the window. When he wouldn't, the sergeant at the scene tried to break it.
Hey, you're being detained. Roll the window down. You're being lawfully detained.
For what?
For a traffic stop.
For what?
Because you were harassing somebody at a house. Roll the window down. Yeah, you were. Roll the window down. Roll it down or I'm going to break the window.
If we have black blinds in this house.
Roll the window down or I'm going to break the window. Roll the window down or I'm going to break the window. You're being lawfully detained.
For what?
I just told you. Stop. Stop the car. Stop the car. Stop the car. I'm going to shoot. Stop the car. Stop the car. Stop the car. Stop the car.
I didn't do anything.
Stop the car.
Sergeant was dragged about 300 feet before he was able to free himself. Sergeant then ended up shooting at the suspect. A few minutes later, police found the car and the suspect in a parking lot. He was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, then booked on unrelated felony charges in the neighboring city there. Fortunately, the officer did not suffer any serious injury. The incident is still under investigation. Joining me now is Joe Sullivan, former Philadelphia Deputy Police Commissioner. Commissioner, thank you so much for taking the time. Take us through this from the officer's perspective.
Certainly, and thank you for having me, Dan. So the officers are responding to a radio call of a suspicious person. So they have a right to stop that vehicle. It was a good car stop. When they do, the male is reaching under the seat, making other furtive movements. Police also have the right during a car stop to control the actions of the person while inside the vehicle for their own safety. Also, they're asking to see driver's license and registration, which is standard. Driving is a right. I mean, it's a privilege, not a right. So police in most states have a right to require you to produce that identification. The male is refusing to do so. The officers give multiple warnings. They actually give warnings that they're going to break the window. They do have the right to do so. If the male refuses to comply and cooperate, then they can make a custodial arrest and conduct their investigation in custody. What happens here is the male lowered the window a small amount so that there was give to the window, so the window didn't break. And then the sergeant reaches into the car, which is not a good tactic, and becomes engaged with the car and is now having to run alongside the car. Now, at this point, the sergeant may well have been in his right if the male accelerated any faster to have used deadly force. Unfortunately, the sergeant disengages from the vehicle, and that is the point at which he discharges his firearm, which is not likely within the policy of that department. There's always a concern shooting at vehicles. Number one, if you should hit the driver, now you have an incapacitated driver and a uncontrolled vehicle.
We are out of time. The incident is under investigation. I'm so sorry, Commissioner, to have interrupted you. We're just fresh out of time. So appreciate your time. News Nation starts now. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.